In recent years, I've been able to get a flu shot at a drugstore. It's fast and easy. Many years ago, I'd have to go to a physician's office or a hospital. Before that, there were no flu shots. Well, how can the healthcare system be more responsive and more cost effective? Many people argue in favor of midwifery. For Throwback Thursday, here's a look at maintaining health and public safety through midwifery. Hello, I'm Alan Bonner. Canada was the last developed country to recognize the practice and profession of midwifery. Until recently, it was not possible to practice as a midwife within the healthcare system in Canada, except in some very remote areas. But with a dwindling supply of physicians able to do the job and Canada's birth rate growing, there have been some efforts to make midwifery a central part of women's healthcare in our country. Now, I've got a vague sense of what nurses go through in their education. They were in another faculty when I was an undergraduate, but they hung around for 4 years and got a degree like everyone else on the campus. What kind of an education do you go through and other midwives go through?
So in Ontario, midwives go through, and in many of the legislated provinces where they have a midwifery program, you go through a 4-year Bachelor's of Health Science degree. So we come with a university degree. That is, we specialize in normal birth. So I, would call myself a specialist in normal birth, but having that background, I also am well aware of the emergencies that can come up, and we know we do a lot of training in emergency skills also.
Sounds like similar curriculum to a nurse.
It's actually more similar to, I would say it's partway between what nurses get, what family doctors get, and what obstetricians get.
It's been a long time since I was in I was going to say operating room, it wasn't. Whatever room in the hospital my wife had our children in, there were a lot of people in there. We had a physician there, we had a nurse there, I was there, and Manavi, where would you have fit in had we used a midwife?
So if everything is low risk, we work very similarly to family practitioners who do obstetric care in urban settings. So you would essentially have had 2 midwives at the delivery and our students, at least one student usually. So it would have been you, your wife, anyone else you guys wanted there, and then just the midwives. And everyone else is kind of available if you have a hospital birth outside the door, but they're not in there with you.
Why aren't nurses doing this work? Because it just seems really natural that you have this education, you have this skill, you're in the hospital, most nurses are female.
It's a really good question, and I think it probably comes down to your issue of training. The way nurses are trained we have a 4-year undergraduate Bachelor of Science degree in nursing, but the training in terms of obstetrics is, it can be very minimal, so that nurses would graduate as generalists and may choose to go into obstetric nursing, but they are not trained to catch babies. They do everything else but. So I think you're highlighting one of the issues, which is, why not?
So what are the implications for a healthcare system that's bursting at the seams? We don't have enough physicians and all that other stuff that's happening. Anne, what are your thoughts?
I think there's definitely a place for the expansion of the midwifery model, and primarily as giving people options about the kind of care provider they would like to choose. And I think from a financial point of view, you've made a good argument for that as well.
And I suspect I know what your position is, but do you have any other thoughts on where you fit into a healthcare system that is strapped?
I think one of the major issues in our healthcare system is we have specialist obstetricians who are medical specialists and surgeons providing care to the majority of low-risk women in the province and in the country. And that financially doesn't make sense. It makes sense for low-risk women to be taken care of by low-risk providers. And those obstetricians won't be as stretched in terms of being able to take care of high-risk clients.
I'd like to know what the relationship is like between a nurse and a midwife, and there I have one of each sitting side by side. What's it like?
Well, philosophically, we're on the same level, but in the hospital, the model that is often present is that when midwives are doing a hospital birth, we as nurses have nothing to do with what's going on in that room, and there's a sort of curiosity, what are they doing in there? The only time we would get involved as labor and delivery nurses is when there's a transfer of care to a specialist, for example, an obstetrician.
And that means a problem.
Yes, so for many nurses, their understanding of midwifery is there's a problem.
Would everybody be better off, with the possible exception of the budget chief at the hospital, but would everybody be better off if the nurses saw more of what the midwives do, and the midwives got to know the nurses and their challenges in the hospital?
In fact, there's a big push for something either called interprofessional education or collaborative care in maternity, and the bottom budget line could actually be improved. So what are the opportunities for training together, for sharing philosophies, for understanding each other's scope? If we put the woman in the center, how can all of us as related professionals really work to the service of that woman? And in the end, from a budget bottom line, if we have satisfied moms, safe and happy babies, that's good for everyone.
Would these hypothetical parents to be that are watching the program today find themselves in between a bit of a contest or in some friction if they retain a midwife without telling the GP? GP wants to refer them to a hospital and a gynecologist, and all these practitioners are at loggerheads. So how do you smooth that out?
I think that's much less common than people think. A lot of the OBs we work with, there isn't a sense of competition because they have so many women that they need to care for, and they have to care for high-risk women. There's
And
no
they're
one
looking
else in the
after
system.
perhaps 4,000 births a year in obstetrician?
400.
400. How many
3
would a
to
midwife
400.
handle?
40 to 80.
So about 10%.
Yeah.
You must spend either a lot more time
We
or
spend a lot more time, and I think that's part of what women find useful. What I would say is if you're not sure, call your local midwifery practice and go for what we call an initial session where we talk about what midwifery is and what we could offer and our philosophy and get to know the woman a little bit. But I think one of the big benefits is we spend an average of 30 to 45 minutes per appointment, and OB schedule an average of 5 to 7 minutes per appointment. And that's a luxury that we have as practitioners.
Well, thank you both very much. You bring back great memories of being in the hospital and watching my kids get born. So thank you very much for doing that. And thanks for all the information that I'm sure our viewers benefited from. See you next time. Any views expressed here are not necessarily those of the Mackenzie Institute, its speakers, sponsors, or supporters. But the Institute is dedicated to fostering public discussion, debate, and education about security matters. Google the Mackenzie Institute to join the discussion. The Mackenzie Institute is grateful to its sponsors and supporters. Some of our short pods and long talks are a result of the support of Heathbridge Capital Management Limited, the National Post, and Dundurn Publishing.